Today is June 18th, 2026. June's halfway over. I am Terrible Ted. You're tuned into America Betrayed. I have a very special guest with me today. We're going to talk about something that's a little different from what I usually cover here on the show, but if you stick with it, if you follow this, I'm telling you guys, this is a big story. This is a big case with a lot of twists and turns, and I have perhaps, I would say, probably the best person to help play this out and break it down for a brand new audience. Today I have Aimee from CaseXCase on YouTube with me, and we're going to talk about the Delphi Murders from February of 2017, Delphi, Indiana, which is right outside Lafayette, which is home to Purdue University. For some of you sports fans, Axl Rose from Guns N' Roses grew up in Lafayette, Indiana, okay? But we're going to talk about the Delphi Murders of 2017. Aimee, are you here with me?
I am here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for coming on and giving me time. I really appreciate it. Why don't you start out, give folks a little bit of information to find you on social media, give out your YouTube channel and the specifics.
Okay, so I am CaseXCase on YouTube, which is CaseXCase. My email is casexcase10@gmail.com for anybody out there who wants to reach out regarding the Delphi case, or possibly in need of help for advocacy for my niche is really wrongfully convicted. I went to school at the Academy of Court Reporting. From there, I was recruited into law enforcement and worked in the Columbus Police radio room throughout 9/11. I have a background with communications with law enforcement leads, all of the above. So then over time, I've always been a true crime fanatic, so to speak. However, I've always been a rooter of the underdog. And when I come across cases where I feel something's just not sitting right, I like to dig in. And that started back probably 10 years ago with the Stephen Avery, Brendan Dassey case out of Wisconsin. I became a follower of a group called Foul Play, which advocated for the two wrongfully convicted men in that case. And from there, the ball just started rolling. I met up with several great attorneys who also were in that sort of genre of working for defendants who were reaching out, seeking help, who basically were conveying and screaming at the top of their lungs they were wrongfully convicted. And through those connections, I've built kind of like a group of us where I can bounce ideas off of, I can go to. I'm not a lawyer, but having a lot of lawyer friends makes it helpful. So I've been working on a case out of Indiana, a woman who grew up in Delphi, Indiana, who has actually quite the connection to the Delphi case. And I've been advocating and working on her case now for 4 years. I am her power of attorney. We have been fighting her case through the court system. We are now going into hopefully what is called a successive petition. And if that's not successful, then we will go into habeas corpus, which is federal. So yeah, that's kind of my background. That's what I do in my spare time, which is quite consuming on top of researching and covering the Delphi case now for, I think, close to 2.5 years online on my platform. I followed it from day one, but the second that the defendant in the case was convicted, I said, if he's convicted, I'm covering this case publicly. That's what I've done. I have a series on my channel titled The Delphi Vault, where I take you back to the very beginning of the case, back in February of 2017. And we've done approximately 46 episodes with special episodes not really included in that number, going from the very beginning of the case, going all the way through all of the different suspects, phone data, Apple Health data, photographs, crime scene, the odorous theory, you name it, we've covered it, and we're still going. We're still going. So that's a little bit about me.
So I explained to you on the first call we had that I'm not a true crime native. That's not my typical scene. I'm more into news and politics, corruption, conspiracy at the national level, that sort of thing. I would like to find, this little story. I never would have guessed that there's so many twists and turns to this Delphi murder case from 2017. And I'm sorry to say, I never really paid attention to some of these other cases. Who was Casey Anthony? I remember that was a big thing like 15 years ago or so. I remember it being in the news. I didn't really pay attention to it. JonBenet Ramsey, that's another one. I just saw people can't get enough of that story. I went past a video on TikTok of it. I'm sad to say I don't know all the details. I would love to dig into that sometime. The serial killer stuff, Ted Bundy, Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy. I haven't paid too much attention to these sort of stories, and I'm sorry that I haven't. And hopefully I'll get more into some of these things. But you have experience, Aimee, with wrongful convictions. Can you just give me some basic stats about wrongful convictions? How many convictions get overturned across in America, across the country? Do you have any numbers or stats? It's my understanding it's like single digit percentage of cases get overturned.
I believe it's more than that, but it's not likely. And it depends on the arguments that are raised, and it also depends on the state. Every state is different. And I myself personally live in Ohio, but for whatever reason, I've not really worked on a wrongful conviction case here in Ohio. For the last 4.5 years, I've been working out of cases that evolved out of Indiana. And what I have found with wrongful convictions is that once a conviction has come down the pipeline and a defendant is found guilty, they are then up against the fight of their life, regardless of fame or fortune. Once you're convicted, it is literally it's a battle. And the most recent, my first and foremost case which is the case out of Indiana. We have gone through, you're dealing with some cases. I can say emphatically that the Delphi case is a case that is riddled with corruption. And maybe of interest to you, Ted, there is a political position in this whole storyline. We can get into that as we going through the dynamics of the case. But the other case that I've been working on is more about someone not knowing their rights, someone not having the funds to hire a private attorney, and you pretty much get the hand that you're dealt with. And it is the wrongful conviction rate is it's staggering, and it's not as there's not a lot of political, there's not a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? It's not highlighted as much as it should be, the amount of cases that are overturned, especially with DNA. DNA has really played a big role in exonerations. Prime example, Stephen Avery. Stephen Avery served 18 years for a sexual assault that he did not commit, and it was DNA that exonerated him. And the corruption in that case that he fell prey to was the fact that he then had a lawsuit against the state of Wisconsin for the wrongful conviction when law enforcement knew he was not the right guy. and kept him incarcerated 8 years longer than he should have been, until they had no choice but to admit, okay, the DNA exonerated you. He was weeks away from a very big payday in a civil lawsuit when he was then charged with murder. In that case, it was law enforcement who were going to be held personally liable for their bad acts during the sexual assault conviction. The insurance company for the department said, hey, we're not covering. Their pensions are going to be on the line. Their private equities are going to be on the line. So conveniently, he's then charged with murder. And it's staggering, and it depends. I don't have an exact number. It is low for the amount of people that I believe are either wrongfully convicted or overcharged, to say the least. And it's mind-boggling to see some of these people who have been charged for astronomical crimes who get a slap on the wrist. And then you have somebody who has a minor drug charge who serves double the time. The justice system needs reformed in this country, and it is definitely on a massive scale where people are being railroaded in this country hand over fist, and every case is different. That's the best answer I can give you.
Okay, yeah. Then this little case that I've tuned into here for maybe a couple months, this is frightening stuff, and I say that as someone, I am a bit old school. I do think if we have someone who's convicted of, say, rape or violent crime, it wouldn't bother me if they're found guilty by a jury of their peers. I'm not opposed to the death penalty at all. I'm old school in that sort of respect. And then, of course, on the other hand, the fact that there are people who inevitably are going to be wrongfully convicted. Boy, this really is concerning and gives me pause. I can tell you that right before COVID, I did happen to find myself on jury duty for a murder case. It was a drug deal gone bad, and an innocent bystander ended up catching a bullet and being killed. And the evidence against the defendant was overwhelming. They had him admitting on tape at the police station to it. They had overwhelming forensic evidence with the bullet in the gun, the murder weapon, his fingerprints, him, pictures on social media. It was overwhelming, but I still found myself thinking, okay, is there any way? Is there any sort of way? Is there any out for this person? Is there any reasonable doubt here? I still felt a tremendous duty to look for it and try to sort it out mentally because of the responsibility that I had as a juror. So, those are my comments on that. Let's get back to the main story here. So it's February 2017, Delphi, Indiana. What happens? What's the story here? Let's lay out the basic details. Can you take us through the basics of this case, Delphi, Indiana, February 2017?
Absolutely. So Delphi, Indiana is a small town. It's a beautiful little town. I've been there numerous times. I've traveled there. I've done research on the ground there. And I to be honest, I could live there. It's beautiful. It's a quaint little town, lovely scenery. And this takes place, again, in Delphi, population about 3,000, give or take. Within a trail system called it's the Monon High. It's the Monon High Bridge where this incident actually occurred. It was a Monday, February 13th, and the girls in Delphi, the kids in Delphi, had the day off of school. They had not, they had calamity days, snow days that weren't used. So they had an extra day off of school. The weather was decent. I wouldn't say it was extremely warm, but apparently the kids thought it was. So you have Abby Williams and Liberty German, they were good friends. They played sports together. They both lived very close to the trail system, and they had asked for permission to go to the trails. And they got a ride from Liberty German's older sister to take them to the trails and drop them off. And Liberty German's dad was supposed to pick them up roughly around 3 p.m. So they head out from the Patty residence. So Liberty German was Liberty and Kelsey, aka from here on out, I'm just going to call her Libby. Libby and her sister Kelsey were living with her grandmother and grandfather, who had custody of them. They both went to Delphi schools, and Libby and Abby had become very close friends. And Kelsey she had plans to go in to town to see her boyfriend before she went to work at the Dairy Queen. So she agreed to drop the girls off at the trail system, and Liberty's dad was going to pick them up around 3 o'clock. They are on their way to the bridge, and they're dropped off at what they call the Mears lot, which is it's not the main trailhead of the trail system. It's kind of a side entrance across the street from the Mears farm. And it's basically a small little pull-in gravel drive. If you just pull in right there at the opening, it's like a 30-second walk from that entrance up to the actual trail. You turn left and you head towards the Monon High Bridge. The Monon High Bridge is an old transit railroad it's got wooden planks, wooden railroad ties mounted about 60 feet above Deer Creek. And it's literally, I think it possibly 2.5, 3 football fields long. It's very long. It's very high. And they were dropped off. And the original story was they were dropped off. They were just going to go out there, take photographs, take video of scenery. That was something that they were into. We also know that Libby and her sister had been involved in geocaching. And that's kind of like treasure hunting. I'm not really inept to what that all entails, but they did do geocaching, and there were geocache areas out there by the bridge. So the girls were dropped off, and we know that from the time that they were dropped off, Kelsey German, Libby's older sister's vehicle, was seen on a camera that was about 30 seconds away from that entrance at 1:49. It was a vehicle that was depicted. All we got of it, we never seen the actual video footage of the cars going to and from that day. It was screenshots of a computer screen of a vehicle that we were told was Kelsey's. There is a 205 photograph that was allegedly posted to Libby's Snapchat account of the Monon High Bridge with no one on it. Then there's another photograph of Abby, and if you believe that Libby is the only one that has a phone, Libby is in front of Abby. She's turned around. She's taking a photograph of Abby on the bridge, roughly right before the third platform. So this bridge has platforms that are like bump outs. So like train workers, if a train was on the rails, they could step off the train track and stand on this platform. There were multiple platforms, and they were roughly up on the third platform where Libby was. turned around to take a photo of Abby. And I have never personally seen an actual photograph, this photograph with an actual timestamp. All we have ever gotten is screenshots of this photograph that says 5 hours ago, 7 hours ago. Someone screenshotting it off of Libby's Snapchat. Then there is a video that begins at 2:13. And I'm not going to go into detail about the video. All I'm going to say is that for almost 6 years, we were led as the public to believe this video was horrendous. It was intense. It documented the final moments of the girls' lives. And they just couldn't release it because of that. So we know at 2:13 there was a video. The video is 43 seconds long. So that video started at 2:13. The state, by the time we got to trial, said that both of the girls had expired by 2:32 p.m. They were forced to go down there, where this bridge is. It is up high. When you get to the south end of the bridge, which is the opposite side of the bridge. So the girls walked across this bridge to the other side. They were ordered down the hill. Going down the first hill, it takes you to a private drive. You walk across that private drive, and then you immediately come to kind of a complete drop-off. I have been there. In my personal opinion, the girl, they had to have gone either to the right or to the left and found an easier way down, more of a slanted slope to get down that secondary hill, because just going straight down the first hill, crossing the private drive, they couldn't have gone down that secondary hill straight on. And the private drive actually takes you to a residence. A family by the name of Weber. And Kay Weber was the property owner at the time. She had been in and out of the state. She used to vacation in Arizona. While she was on vacation, her son, Brad, would stay at the property. So this private drive came in from a whole other side of the trail system. You would take the private drive all the way around. You would come underneath the bridge, curve to the right, and go up to the property. So the secondary hill that the girls would have been forced to go down, they then would have been forced to go across Deer Creek, which at the time, the water level and the movement of the water would have made it very difficult for these girls to have navigated. And it would also have been very difficult for one person to control two girls crossing a creek like this, because the water level was so high due to it being February, the snow, the drainage of the water. And ultimately the girls were found the next day, about 50 feet or so on the other side of the creek from the bank. Libby was found nude, and Abby was found to be wearing Libby's clothes. Very strange.
Okay, let's stop and let's recap this here, because people are going to hear this for the first time. So these two teenage girls, Abby and Libby, they decide on Monday, February 13th, a day that they had off from school, they decide sometime after noon that, hey, we want to go to the trail system that's here in town. And so they get a ride from Libby's older sister, Kelsey,
Mhm.
and they get dropped off. What time again? Are we like 140, 150?
If I remember correctly, Libby's phone was plugged into the car charger, and it was unplugged at, I want to say, 138. Um, if my memory serves me correctly, it was roughly around that time, because that was an indicator that's when the girls were, you know, or one. It was either 138 or 148. Um, we know now from Kelsey's testimony at trial that she did not even turn into the Mears lot. She stayed. It's a road called 300 North. So as she approached, instead of turning into the Mears lot, she just stayed on the roadway with the nose of her car still facing the road and let the girls out. And she was then seen on the camera right up the street it's called the Hoosier Harvest Store. She was seen, her vehicle, the state indicated this was her vehicle that they were showing us the screenshot at 149. And it's about a 30-second drive. So I would say 148, the girls were dropped off.
Okay, so 148. So let's see. The video that was recovered from one of the victims' phone, Libby German's phone, has the alleged supposed abduction at 2:13 by this man, Bridge Guy, as they call him.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Correct.
from 148, so we're roughly 150 to a little past 210. They're on the trails for under 30 minutes, 20 something minutes total, right? And after that, that's not a long time after being dropped off. I mean, if you're out walking trails and such, I imagine there's miles and miles of trails. They are not out there very long, in my opinion. But as we see from the video recovered from Libby German's phone, they are apparently approached and abducted by this guy, Bridge Guy, at 2:13. So, now take me through. Okay, so the girls get abducted at 2:13, forced to go down the hill, somewhere around there. Now, the father, was it the father or the step grandfather that was going to pick the girls up? Was it Derek or was it Mike Patty?
It was Derek. Libby made a phone call on her way to the trails to ask her dad if he would pick them up. And from all accounts, there is a he was Libby's grandmother she was a appraiser for properties, and he had been sent out to a town called Frankfurt to do photographs of some property for his mom. And on his way back in, he was going to swing by the trails and pick up the girls. And there's a phone call from him. And by all accounts, he was crossing a bridge called Wilson Bridge, which is literally right around the corner from the Mears lot. He made a phone call to Libby at 3:11, and in which she did not answer. The odd thing about the timing of this video is that when you break it all down, so they get dropped off at the Mears lot and they head into the trail system. They get to the intersection. I mean, this is a gravel driveway, basically. Takes about, if you're coming from the edge of the road at 300 North, you're dropped off there like they were. It's about a 30-second walk to get to the actual trail. You walk up and you have a choice. You can go left or you can go right. If you go left, well, actually, you have three choices. You can go left, which takes you to the Monon High Bridge, or you can go straight across the main trail to a secondary trail that's called the Mary Gerard Trail, which takes you down towards Deer Creek. or you can go right, which takes you back out to Freedom Bridge, which was the main trailhead of the trail system at the time. So the girls took a left, and that's about a 6.5 minute walk from once they get to the trail, the three-way trail system. They turn left. It's about a 6.5 minute walk to make it to the Monon High Bridge. We have that 205 photo. And then 2 minutes later, we have Abby almost 3/4 of the way across the bridge. In the state, this photo of Abby on the bridge at 2:07 p.m. is not in the phone. It's not in it's not in Snapchat. It's not in the phone cache. The ISP forensic phone expert that the state put on in his deposition and basically at trial admitted that we don't know where this photo came from. All we know that it emerged online. So this 207 photo is a timestamp assigned by the state based on an app being in the phone data as being in the foreground. There's no digital file created. There's no picture taken. This 207 photo comes out of nowhere, and the state assigned a 207 timeline or a timestamp to that. But then if you think about it, 207, she's 3/4 away across the bridge in this photo. It then takes her 6 minutes based on where she is when the 213 video begins. And you briefly see this man walking behind her. So whatever transpired on that bridge, we don't know. We don't know if someone came from the south end of the bridge, passed the girls, and then did a U-turn and began to follow them. We don't know if someone was hiding. All indications in this case, based on everything that we know now, is that I'm going to say this intently. Those of us who believe in the innocence of the individual who has been found guilty of this crime, we believe the girls were lured out there. They were anticipating meeting someone out there on the trail system. And we don't know if that person was laying in wait, if the girls were ambushed by multiple people, which I believe has to be the case because I can't see how one person could commit this crime in the time frame that the state has provided, along with all of the other people that were on the trail system that day that the jury never heard about. It makes no sense how the time that the state laid out for us to believe that this crime was committed, factually, it does not work.
Right. Now, you're spooking me out with a couple of these little twists and turns in the story. Like I said, for folks that are just hearing this on my channel for the first time, there are so many twists and turns in the story. This story is tragic. It's spooky to read about. If you read some of the speculation that's online, you try to put together the pieces, you're going to feel and see what I'm talking about, the spookiness. And we won't go into all those details here, but we will eventually in due time. But I want to lay out the basic case here in this first episode for people. So we went over some of the timelines. We talked about the bridge. The girls get abducted. The state thinks at around 2:13. Derek German is supposed to come and pick them up around 3. Aimee, take me back to around 3 when Derek shows up, and let's go through that. I guess make our way towards what happens the rest of the night on the 13th.
So the girls, Derek starts calling Libby's phone, and it is reported that Abby didn't have a phone. That's up for conjecture, but he's calling Libby's phone and she's not answering. So he then calls his mother. The first phone call he made to Libby was around 3:11 p.m. in the afternoon, as he's crossing Wilson's Bridge, which is roughly half mile from the actual Mears lot trailhead where he was supposed to be meeting with the girls to pick them up. So he's calling, she's not answering. He gets to the trails. He's sitting in the car making phone calls. He calls his mom and he says, "Hey, Libby's not answering. I don't, can you call her? I don't know why she's not answering, but she's not here." So Becky Patty, Libby's grandmother, starts making phone calls to Libby's phone and starts texting. She's not answering. And very quickly, red flags start going off. For whatever reason, they became very concerned that Libby's not answering her phone. And so Derek gets out of his vehicle and he starts to walk the trails. He runs into a man by the name of David McCain, who is later, throughout, anybody who researches this case, you will come to learn that this man was very early on known as Flannel Shirt Guy because he had on a flannel shirt. David McCain and his brother, Dan McCain, were the caretakers of the trail system. And they were brothers, and they were the ones who had started to do the renovations of the trail system there in Delphi, making it more of a community attraction, a place for families to go out and spend time, et cetera, et cetera. Derek runs into him. He's basically says, "No, I haven't seen them." Derek starts walking back and forth, and then Becky Patty starts alerting other family members that, "Hey, Libby's not answering her phone." She contacts Mike Patty. Mike Patty is at work at Caterpillar. He says, "I'm heading that way now. I'll meet you there." Becky's oldest daughter, which is Derek's sister, Tara, she's heading that way. Cody Patty, which is Kelsey and Libby's cousin, is heading that way. Now, I'm not going to go into semantics about who rode with who arrived exactly when, but the family ended up on the trails very quickly. By around 5:30, law enforcement is being contacted. Mike Patty had some friends on the force. He made a phone call and said, "Hey, we're out here. We were supposed to, Libby was supposed to get picked up. The girls are missing, yada, yada, yada." Law enforcement starts to ascend on the trail system. There's people coming and going on the trails who witnessed the family being out there asking questions. There were people who were on the bridge, in fact, as early, if you put this in perspective, the video started at 2:13, and there's people on the bridge as early as 2:30 who saw and heard nothing. And that area sound travels. You have a clear view of the Deer Creek, and how all of this can take place within that vicinity and no one hear or see a thing is mind-boggling. But law enforcement starts to descend out there, and Becky Patty then begins to contact AT&T, which is the phone provider for Libby's phone. And eventually law enforcement gets AT&T to begin to start to ping Libby's phone. Now, there's a lot of unclear information based on how you look at this case, because the AT&T report that we have shows the majority of the time the phone there's really only one cell tower there in Delphi on Wells Street. And Libby's phone was pinging off that cell tower. When we now, in fact, go back and look at that AT&T report. However, if you go through it and you literally use the coordinates, you find that the phone is kind of bouncing. And it's bouncing in ways that don't really make sense. I'm talking miles and miles apart, where the phone could not possibly be here and then there in that time frame. However, you've got family members being interviewed by the news media that night on the 13th, saying the phone's pinging all over town. And you have Tobe Lesenby, who is the Delphi County Sheriff, who initially requested dogs to come out and help search, and then he canceled them. And roughly about 11 p.m. that night, law enforcement calls off the search, saying the terrain is too treacherous, it's too risky. So they call off the search. Everybody reports back to the fire department the next morning on the 14th. Now, there were some people who stayed out on the night of the 13th into the early morning hours of the 14th, still looking. And I'll get into some of those details later. But
let
I
me
will
stop you right here, Aimee.
Okay.
The search gets called off at what, 10:30, 11 o'clock officially?
Correct.
Okay. And I've seen some of the video footage where they're interviewing people out in the black of night on the trails. I can believe the story that the police said, Lesenby and others, the sheriffs, that the terrain's too dangerous in the dark. I can absolutely believe that. I buy that 100%. I think it's dangerous even in daylight. I would have a problem.
I've been there, and some areas of where the girls were found, the terrain is treacherous. However, if you are a searcher and you're following the creek bed, Deer Creek, on either side, it's high. I have never been able to wrap my mind around how they were not found.
Right.
Until the next day.
Okay.
Until the next day.
Right. Now, I've seen other people say that. I saw a video. I think his name's Eric Williams. He's a friend of Adam Bridge. He gets interviewed, and he's said that he swore that he went right past where they were found the next day, but they were not there that night, overnight. So I've seen and heard several of these accounts with people saying that. And you know what? As I was listening to you talk about the Monon High Bridge, and I think it was reported in maybe the FBI document from Robertson that the final resting place of the girls where they're found is 1/5 of a mile from the bridge. I think that was the recount. So I'm picturing this in my mind. If we were standing on the Monon High Bridge and you went down to where the girls were found and you had your cell phone ringer on and I called you and it was dead silent out there, would I hear your phone ringing?
Possibly.
That's an interesting
Possibly.
thought. I've heard several other people, not just you, make the claim that you can hear any and everything. You can hear animals, squirrels running over leaves. You can hear it all. And I know you've said that here too. So I tend to believe that. So
they also had a gentleman out there that I've spoken to that had a infrared drone, who put up his drone, and he's told me it was a new drone. There was no recording of the footage, but he put up the drone. It was after 6 p.m. when it was getting dusk, and the heat infrared light, he could see animals and he could see searchers. He said, but the girls were not there.
All right. So, yeah, the infrared, just to be clear for listeners, you're talking about this picks up body heat from animals or people that would be out in the woods,
Correct.
right? That's what you mean?
Correct. Yes. The
Okay.
heat sensor. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Interesting. God, that's spooky. God. Well,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So 10:30, 11 o'clock, the search gets called off. Um, Is this a typical thing to call it off? I don't know. I just don't have enough. Like I said, I'm not into true crime enough. I have not been in law enforcement. Um, is this unusual to call off a search for missing girls in the middle of the night, or would people normally be expected to power through? I don't know. Do you have any?
I mean, it depends on how it depends on it depends on what side of the fence that you fall on in this case. Um, there's an interview by Tobe Lesenby, the sheriff at the time, who is telling the news media that Abby and Libby had in the past been known to run off, which was not true. And looking back now on all of it, it was more so to cover their hides that um, I think that law enforcement really thought the girls were going to turn up somewhere. And I think based on the cell phone pings, they thought there was movement here, there, and everywhere, which led them to believe, okay, the girls are pulling a fast one on mom, grandma and grandpa and Abby on her mom, which is why the dogs were called off. And I think that the next day, when the girls were found, it was like they were hit upside the head with a brick. Like, oh my God, we called off the search. We didn't take this as serious as we should have, even though all indicators said we should be taking this serious. And then at the same time, you have there's all these questions surrounding what went on that night with the search party and how things were like. First of all, there was based on the information that law enforcement put into the system, they that information did not qualify for an Amber Alert, meaning the girls were in danger. So I don't have access to what Delphi law enforcement put in, but there was no Amber Alert issued for the girls. The dogs were called off. I do know, based on all accounts of eyewitnesses out there, law enforcement had brought out like these big, huge lighting systems. They were lighting up the woods. And the property owner, Ron Logan, where the girls' bodies were found on his property, described it that it was lit up like a football field. So, how these girls weren't found is, again, questionable, but there were some major mistakes made, I think, later on in the evening of February 13th. And by the morning of February 14th, when it all came to a head and the girls were found, everybody was scrambling, I think, to cover their butts because some really bad decisions were made the day before. That's just my opinion, based on the research that I've done, based on the transcripts from the police scanner that I've gone over on the Delphi Vault a couple of times. There are a lot of questionable decisions that were made.
I see. Well, it certainly seems like it. And I had heard or read somewhere that many of the investigators on the case had little or no serious homicide investigation experience like this, missing persons cases experience. So I can believe that a lot of mistakes were made. If people want to put it on incompetence, I can certainly believe that. This is small town Indiana, where not a lot of criminal excitement happens, so I can believe that. But Aimee, we have We have 7-8 minutes left in this first episode. Let's zoom back out and follow me here. Let's go over some more basics of this case. So the girls are found the next day, which is Tuesday, February 14th, 2017. The rest of 2017, an investigation takes place. People are interviewed. Persons of interest, suspects are taken in question. There's a lot of leads, but nothing really comes of it, as far as I understand it. And at the end of 2017, the original district attorney, the original prosecutor, Robert Ives, retires at the end of the year. And then in January 2018, we have a new district attorney. I believe that was Nick McClelland, who eventually oversaw the prosecution of Richard Allen. But, okay, so 2017, nothing really happens. 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021.
Well, no, in 2017, we have in February, right around the 15th and the 22nd of in between the 15th and the 22nd, law enforcement starts to release. They do this enhanced photograph. What they did was they zoomed in. They tried to depixelate the image of the man behind Abby on the bridge. They release that. They give the description, and he looks like every other male in Indiana. He's wearing jeans. It looks like a blue Carhartt jacket. Everything about him you can see visually except for his face, ironically. And then in July of 2017, they released the audio that was captured in the very last seconds of Libby's video. And what they released in 2017 were just the words, "down the hill." They came out with a sketch shortly after. I forget the date of the first sketch, but it's what we call here in the Delphi community the old bridge guy sketch. It's a depiction of an older man wearing some sort of a cap, and he's got a little bit of a scruffy beard, and it was what was put out originally by law enforcement as the sketch of the face of Bridge Guy. So for 2 years, we've got an image, we've got audio, and we have a sketch, and there's no viable suspects. Then, bombshell, in 2019, there is a press conference that's called on April 22nd, where they hold it at a facility in Delphi where Doug Carter, who is the superintendent of ISP, and all of law enforcement at his shoulders, basically speak to the community, and they're going to release new information. And what is released at that press conference pretty much rocked this case from the ground up. Basically, they're saying, old bridge guy sketch, null and void, set it aside. We are now going to unveil this new sketch based off of another witness who was out there on the trails. And it's an image of what we call young bridge guy. And they're telling us that this is now the focus of the investigation. It's going in a new direction. And Doug Carter even goes as far as addressing all of the people who are in the room by saying to the killer who may be in this room, "We are going to find you. Somebody knows." At that same press conference, they release an additional word off of the video where they add the word guys. So now we've gone to guys down the hill, and we have a whole new sketch. And everybody was pretty much like their heads were spinning. Like, how do we go from this man who's plus 40 some years old to this young guy, clean shaven, brown curly hair, in his early 20s? We make this big switcheroo. So that was in April of 2019. And then an arrest wasn't made until 2022.
Right. Now, we've got a couple minutes left. Let's talk about the arrest in 2022. Who is it? Who is the individual who's arrested?
The individual who was arrested, his name is Richard Allen. He was a Delphi resident. He worked as a manager at the CVS locally right there in town, and right next to the McDonald's and the Dairy Queen, where Kelsey German, Libby's older sister, worked. Richard Allen was an individual who had frequented the trails for years, and he had been on the trail system that day. He had, when this incident happened, his wife said, "Babe, they're asking for anybody who was out there that day to come forward." So what does Rick Allen do? The honorable thing. He goes to law enforcement. He says, "Hey, I was there. Whatever you need, I'm willing to give it to you." They said, "Well, we're really busy right now. We'll get back with you." And then like a day later, Dan Doolin contacts Rick and ultimately ends up meeting with Rick outside of the Save-A-Lot grocery store, where Rick hands over his phone. The battery is taken out. They take the EMI number. Rick tells them, "I was there roughly around this time." Rick is 5'4", I think it is, and gives him all of his information. The tip is then Dan Doolin is writing hand notes, goes back to the office, puts his notes into the computer, shreds his handwritten notes. The tip is then marked cleared and stored away for 6 years, almost 6 years. And all of a sudden, during a very controversial sheriff election, where the handling of the Delphi case is being called out by the deputy chief officer in Delphi by the name of Mike Thomas, who decides to run for sheriff, and Tony Liggett, who is running for sheriff. They go head to head in regards to the handling of the Delphi case. And Mike Thomas is letting the public know this case has been mishandled. If you elect me, I'm going to bring back in the FBI, all of the bigwigs. We are going to solve this case. And within 2 weeks before the election, all of a sudden, Rick Allen's tip is pulled out of supposedly a drawer where it had been sitting for years, and we're told that it was lost, even though it's marked cleared. All of a sudden now, he's our guy, when he does not fit one witness on the trail's description of who they saw.
And this is October 2022, and I'm sure, people know the story by now. Richard Allen was later convicted in November 2024 for the double homicide of Libby and Abby here. So, this was a very good first episode here. I just wanted to lay out the sort of overview, the basic facts of the case for people to sink their teeth in. Aimee, go ahead, give out your contact information one more time. Give out your YouTube channel so that people can check out your video series, which is excellent. And I believe it's in a playlist. Tell them how to get to the playlist as well. Go ahead.
This is Case by Case, Case, CaseXCase. case by case. If you go to my channel, if you go to my playlist, you're going to see the Delphi Vault series. We are at 46 episodes. We go over from beginning up to recent events. And just so you know, coming up in September, there are oral arguments before the Indiana appellate courts for Rick Allen, who's in his direct appeal, which I plan to be there. So I will be streaming it live. But I'm just so honored that you had me on. This case is something that the public needs to be made aware of, how quickly your rights, as we go further, if we do more episodes and we get into the violations of Rick Allen's civil rights, it's imperative that everyone understand that no, law enforcement collectively is not bad. However, there are pitfalls in certain places where things can happen that, you know, the world, there's no light shown on it. And this is one of those cases where I guess they thought no one would be watching. And the mysterious aspects of this case has what brought the public attention to the case. And I feel it's very important that people understand that if you don't know your rights, this could happen to any one of us. I'm talking about being swooped up off the street, you being extracted from your life as you know it, and being thrown into a high maximum security prison without ever even being convicted. That is a serious problem, and that's a serious concern that all of us need to be aware of. And that's why this case matters so much on multiple levels, not just with a wrongful conviction, but with the atrocities that come with it. And I'm so grateful, Ted, that you've given me this opportunity.
No, thank you for taking a chance and answering my emails and talking to me. Like I said, I got wind of this story, and just the story spooked the hell out of me. Not only because
it is spooky. It is very spooky.
Not only because of the tragedy of two girls being murdered, but what appears to be the handling and the treatment, the dare I say railroading of this man, Richard Allen, for this crime. This is scary stuff, like you just mentioned. If you're guilty, you need a lawyer. If you're innocent, you really need a lawyer, maybe two. And
amen. Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, of course, I don't advocate for any criminal activity, but this is one of those cases where it really hits home that you can never talk to police. And I've seen videos over the years of people just, you know, traffic violations and cops coming up and they want to play the 20 questions game with you. And you need to be calm and courteous, but I'm not here to answer questions. I don't answer questions without a lawyer present. People really need to get this through their head. And poor Richard Allen, for all the wrong reasons, went and cooperated with authorities and told them everything about what he was doing and all this sort of stuff. And he spoke without a lawyer. And I can't help but think that he did himself in, so to speak, to a certain degree by doing that. So I want to reiterate, I do not talk to police. Do not, if the FBI comes to your door for whatever reason, even if you are guilty, I would highly advise you not speaking with them without a lawyer present. And this is one of those things. I think ordinary people, the average Joes, they sort of still think that cops in the legal system are your friends. They're on your side. You can be trusted. We still live in an Andy Griffith America. Folks, the evidence does not support that. We are not in Andy Griffith America anymore, unfortunately. So any other closing statements or thoughts here, Aimee?
No, just I'm looking forward to the next episode where we can get into more detail, why this case should really impact every human on this planet, when you're talking about innocent versus guilt. Representation is a must. And when law enforcement knocks at your door, you need to not wear your badge of innocence on your sleeve. You need to remember that uh, you need to protect yourself. And um, it doesn't matter how you think you're going to be judged. Like, you hear the saying, well, if you're innocent, you just show up, you go to the police station and you sit down and you talk. No, you can dig yourself a hole really quick, especially in a case that is high profiled that they want to solve. Sometimes you just, when you open that door, you put a target on your back. And this case, on so many levels, uh, checks the box with conspiracy theories, and how a judge rules from the bench, and how a prosecutor handles himself and conducts himself, and how a defense team defends a defendant, and how the new age. The one important thing, I think this is the most important thing, the new age of armchair sleuths and YouTube creators who really take the time. I understand lawyers have numerous cases that they're working and they're limited on their time. But normally, armchair sleuths dedicate themselves to a case. And a lot of times, there's real information to be had. And attorneys in big, high profile cases need to stop ignoring the information that's coming to them raw from those who have been working the streets, those who have been working behind the scenes with locals or people who are willing to speak to the armchair sleuth versus law enforcement. There's a lot of information to be had there. And I think that that's going to be the new turning point in how cases get worked in the future. And I would like to see more law firms, more more defense attorneys being open to receiving the work that's being done by those who are volunteering their time.
Well, I absolutely agree with that. And I know the defense team, Andrew Baldwin and Rozzy, that they went down to Georgia to meet with a witness who had information pertinent to the case. I know they went all the way down there to meet with him. I've seen subsequent post-trial interviews of Baldwin and Jennifer. Is it Auger? I forget.
Jennifer O'Shea.
Okay. Thank you. And she even said that she thinks it's a good idea, like you mentioned, to have a social media person who sort of helps out and wades through some of the information that people are talking about. So I think you're absolutely right about it. Hats off to you. And I know there's other people out there too.
There's tons of other people. There's this community is strong. The people who are backing the Free Rick Allen cause is strong. We have been dubbed the name of the Cranks. And if we all have put in the work, to be honest, there's a lot of us who have put in the work. And the next episode we'll get into, there is a website. It's called GitHub. The case against Rick Allen. That's ran by a young lady who is, her online screen name is All Eyes on Delphi. She has done a fantastic job of documenting every single portion of this case, whether it be pretrial transcripts to exhibits to hearings, you name it, she's got it documented. You can find it at GitHub, the case against Rick Allen, and she's amazing. And I don't think to date I have ever seen such accurate case documentation than what you would find there. So if anybody wants to go read any trial transcripts, review the exhibits, listen to audio recordings of interviews, that's where you're going to find it. GitHub, the case against Rick Allen. She's done a phenomenal job. And I commend all of my comrades in this platform who support the innocence of Rick Allen. And hopefully we are on our way to some sort of finally getting some sort of justice for Abby and Libby as we go into the September oral arguments, because that's ultimately what this is about. Rick has been railroaded, but first and foremost, Abby and Libby do not have justice in this case. That's my opinion. If you don't believe that Rick Allen committed this crime, then you can't believe that Abby and Libby have had justice.
Well said. Aimee, I'm going to make a note here of where we left off in the conversation, and we will pick this up in episode 2 next time. Thank you for being with me, and this is going to be good. We're slowly going to get there. We're going to get more and more. I didn't want to just jump into all the details. Let's slowly work our way there for folks who haven't caught up on this story. So thank you for being with me, Aimee. We'll be back together here shortly, and we will knock out episode number 2 next time around.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Bye-bye.